Well, my name is Joe Niemeyer, and I am. I'll just start back early on in my life. I grew up in a household where there were three kids, a Catholic family. My oldest brother had a mental illness. He's 10 years older than me, and so when the oldest child has a mental illness, it kind of sets the vibe or the theme for the household. Um, and so there's a certain school of humanity that we were exposed to that we learned in a different way from that than had we had a different experience. Um, and my father, as I was growing up, he ran a manufacturing facility, manufacturing paint, and so I grew up in that realm of manufacturing. I'd go to see my dad's work, and I'd see a big plant filled with powder and paint and splatters and all the other stuff, and see the messiness of humanity, because we had just a small crowd of laborers in there. So
It's family owned.
it was a family owned business, yeah. And so they had manufacturing, they had retail, they had the whole thing under the same roof. And it's a paint industry, which isn't a glamorous industry either. So um, in residential painting, stuff like that. So I grew up, went to school, was kind of the kid that was made fun of or picked on as I was growing up, and which gave you another paradigm that you handle as you get into adulthood. And so I ended up going off to college, basically away from everybody that I went to grade school, high school with. And so I created the New Start for myself. And when I got to college, I joined the College Republicans on campus and helped with a political campaign in a short little bit near the end of the campaign. And the candidate won, and a friend of mine was the page for our senator, and he got to take the consolation call, which was or the concession call. And so it was just kind of an exciting experience. It was fun to be in the middle of the excitement, but at the end of the thing that stuck with me the most about it was at the end of it, when he had his big victory and he gave his big victory speech. I'm standing next to the president of our chapter, and we're sitting here, we're listening to this, and he says, and we're going to do this, and we applaud, and randomly I just stand there not applauding, and the guy next to me would as well. And there's just certain things that it's just like, yeah, that actually isn't a helpful thing to me. And so realizing that it's just like I'm not all on board, and I started actually listening to what I was a child at that point, so I started listening to what people were saying about their stance and their platform, and came to realize that I kind of felt like an orphan when it came to politics. There was just nobody who really, it's like, okay, I'm with you. I was with you there for a while, but so I just kind of disengaged from politics. And at that point, I kind of disengaged from my faith and disengaged from a lot of things, and grew my hair out and joined a band, and dropped out of college. And so a couple years forward, I moved back home because I don't want to spend the money on rent and have to get a real job. So I worked for my dad, and because I did that go through in summers through high school and through college. The heavy season is in the summer when you hire seasonal help in a paint industry. So I got into manufacturing, and worked in the paint plant, worked in quality control, and just was a part of the ugliness, or I shouldn't say the ugliness, but the messiness of what humanity can be. Had a personal conversion working in youth ministry is where I met Valerie, and felt, it's in that conversion of heart that I was called to something more in the way that I acted, to not just, argue and yell with people, but to say, I'm going to find a civil alternative to how we've been battling each other over and over. So as I did that, I realized that more and more people were just, they enjoyed arguing with each other, but not really arguing in the classical sense of arguing. They enjoyed ridiculing and just, it was just animosity rather than trying to engage in dialogue with each other. So in my devotion back into my faith, I was kind of, I was moved by the truth of the pro-life movement, the truth of what, there's life and you can't attack the life. But I also was disenchanted by, I don't know what it was. There's an elitism. There's something I couldn't name about it. And it allied itself with, so often with things that were not, that didn't seem to fit with the dignity of humanity. And I felt like there was a certain amount of, leave people at the door. There was a great analogy that a friend of ours years ago said, and it kind of, it named a truth of what I was feeling. And he said that in our abortion, our approach to the pro-life movement, a lot of times what we do is kind of like when people are riding down the hill in carts and crashing at the bottom and they're dying. And we're standing here saying, cart crashes kill people, stop the cart crashes. But sometimes we're just not going up to the top of the hill and telling people to stop getting on the carts. We're not dealing with those first pieces that happen before you get to the encounter. The number one cause of abortion is pregnancy. And so just what are the things that cause us that? And that's what really, that's what was burning on my heart, is like, what is causing people to be in the poverty situations that get us to where we are? How did we get to where we are? And so every 4 years, we'd always gear up and say, we've got to make a stand and stand up for life, and we've got to change the paradigm. And, it seemed like a valiant effort and a great, like this marvel of, humanity, that we're going to save lives. But every 4 years, it seemed like it was a little less honorable of a decision, and a little less honorable of a decision. And so it was just back in 2016, we were it was at the point that it felt like, is the pro-life vote actually honorable at all at this point? And so we, in distress, called up a friend of ours here in town and said, well, what do we do? I'm just somebody we trust and who's really engaged in politics. And he said, well, there is another option. And that's when he told us about the American Solidarity Party. And we had 48 hours to figure out, well, he told us about it, we better go look and see what's going on. And at the end, we felt confident. We have the freedom of living in a red state and being able to lose a vote and not have a fear of losing the vote. And so we said, we're going to stand up and vote the ASP. And so we did. I did. And that was our first approach to it. We were excited that there was something that kind of filled in some of those holes and some of those voids. And as we've been doing the pattern for a couple of decades, we'd cast our vote and then just step back out of politics again and quit worrying about it and quit paying attention to it. And so we started engaging, 2017, something like that, started looking at what's going on in the discussions, because we were on the outside. We never reached out to anybody, never tried to connect to the party or anything of that nature. And because we'd never been politically active. So,
except pro-life.
Yeah, except the pro-life stuff. And so we saw some of the discussions, and we're anxious and nervous. We're going, what direction is this party going to go? What is it going to, because it's so new and so young and so small that a quick influx of people can move it one direction or another. And we just weren't certain. And we have, after I met Valerie, we got married, we have 6 children. And so there's only so much time that we have to spend on things outside of the home. And so we just kind of backed off. for a while. And um, this year we actually started getting geared up for this whole election thing a lot earlier. And we said, okay, we're just going to go back and we're going to look at the American Solidarity Party. We looked at the platform, and we were sold from that moment on. We said, this is exactly what I want. There may be a few words or a few phrases that may be a little bit softened than what I would do myself if I were writing it just for myself and my own person. But it's amazing to us how it was beautiful to us. And so we signed up that day. We said, okay, how do we get on board? What do we do? And signed up that day, and haven't looked back. And this one of the things that really Valerie has committed and put in everything that she has to this. And I wish that I had more time to offer to it, but the thing that allowed us to feel free to step in and say we're going to do that, because we said, well, we've heard the talk that it was after that election cycle, a whole bunch of people were disenchanted with what they saw in their party, and they said, I'm just done with this, and they came to the American Solidarity Party, and there's a lot of instability that happens. And I'm very convinced that you need a foundation. You need a mission. As a family, we need a family mission. As a church, you need a church mission. You need something that you can build upon, a foundation that's going to stay, and it's not going to be built on the sand. And so we said this statement of principles is just so important to us at this point. And now at this point, come to where we are right now today. The way that statement of principles came through at that convention was exactly, it's all of what I love about the party, that people with differing opinions and views got together and sat together in a virtual room and hammered it out for hours on end, and came to a consensus together. And it's exactly what I love about it. And then the supermajority of 2/3 is much more compatible with what I believe should be done than what was put out there initially. It's just everything came to the point of it's exactly what I wanted, and so I'm at home at this point. And so I wanted to. I do remember something I was supposed to name. She gave me some tips and some notes, but I came from a hectic evening tonight. So I have. I've worked now in manufacturing for the last 25, 28 years. And I've worked in family-owned businesses, private companies, and in very incredibly good ownership and the like. And I've seen a lot of shops. I shouldn't say a lot of shops, but I've seen a few shops that were just that were harmed by a union influence, and through experiences with family. Her father's lived through that as well. And we had a company that was under our umbrella that went under from that, the impact of that. And so it was just, I feel like I have a necessary voice within the myriad of experiences of what the party has to offer, of having experience manufacturing. I've worked through the operations end of it. I've worked through the management side. I've worked in the support side, administrative side. And so I've got an experience and a voice that is necessary to be heard at this point too.
Joe, thanks. I want to interrupt you for just a second, and we'll circle back. Laura, I want to introduce you to Brian Carroll, who's joined our call. Brian is our presidential candidate. Yes. Brian, Laura is a Nebraska member. This is her first Zoom with us. So I just wanted to take that moment to introduce you. And Brian, I'm sorry I didn't see that you were waiting. So fortunately, Michael sent me a message so I could let you in. But my apologies. And then Michael and Brian, I want to let you guys know how I think you already have a feel for this, but just how incredible Joe and Valerie have been to our state and also helping at the national level as well. But they really are, they're the bedrock of what's happening here, and you can kind of hear it in his story. But they're the reason that whatever progress whatever progress we make here is fundamentally related to the investments that they have made and continue to make here in Nebraska and for the party nationally. So Joe, listen, I wanted to ask a follow-up question for you. So given our perspectives on distributism as a sort of preferred model to the other two general models, how do you see implementation of distributist principles in a manufacturing context, and whether the particular entity is unionized or not unionized? How do you see that playing out on the ground?
So we have, I work for a company that has actually experienced the purchase and the buyout from a larger organization. That's kind of part of the market growth directive of the organization. But one of they're a lean manufacturing organization, and one of the primary principles in lean manufacturing is the value of the shop floor worker and the value of the team that they exhibit. So actually one of the things that I read, and if you look it up, there's a Harvard Business Review article about a plant manager from Toyota, and it's learning to lead. Have you read that?
Yeah.
And what really struck me is they were teaching him in the United States. He never went to his own plant for, I think, 6 months or something like that. He went through training. And the way that they taught him to run a plant was to put him on teams with the shop floor operators. And they make improvements to their process. They implement the improvements, and then they report back to management what they improved. And he didn't get it, so they ended up having to send him to Japan for 3 months so that he could learn from people at the home office, so they could really understand that the core of what happens is the people doing the work. And my company really has learned how to embody that as a lean company, and it's really the principle of subsidiarity, like embodied within manufacturing. And so that's how that distributed side can fit into the model of a larger manufacturing organization. And so basically our company we're a wholly owned subsidiary. So they run this site as its own business that reports back to them, and you have the support of the larger family, but you also have the dialogue and the support of other businesses that you work together with. So it's like a collective.
Yeah. Michael, what are your experiences in terms of the workplaces that you've been involved in, and how they are or aren't distributist in nature, or how they could become more distributist?
Oh, well, I work for a printing company, and I haven't had the sunny experiences that Joe has. It's our management has pretty much ran us into the ground. Our stock sits at 3 cents right now. So, I mean,
that's bad.
Once we, hit that point, it's even now, it's still management first, employees second. Well, actually employees about fourth or fifth, but like Joe said, I mean, thanks to the union influence back when the unions did good things, they've kind of became bloated and corrupt recently. Back then you were given stock options in the company. You were given, and that was your, part of your pension. That was part of your retirement. So you worked hard to get that stock price going sky high. I think we need to see a return to that more often, make us stockholders, because they take care of the stockholders. They don't take care of the employees, but if the employees are stockholders, both sides benefit from, increased production, kind of having a little
Michael,
bit of skin in the game.
So Michael, in your experience, is it typical in manufacturing businesses that employees get options, or is that not typical?
Not around here.
Yeah,
Indiana, especially since we went to the right to work laws, it's,
Is that right? Yeah. And Joe, how about in your experience?
So it all depends. We have the right to, we're a right to work state as well in Nebraska, and it's really all about the human factor of the workplace. It's who's pulling the cords and who's got control of it as to how you're going to live the business. We personally we're not publicly traded, we're a private company, but we do profit sharing with all the employees. Everybody gets their share. Like when we had, as we started the pandemic, we were contacted by the Department of Homeland Security and said, keep your business running. So our company, when they did that, a lot of people were anxious, and they said, well, if you come to work, we'll give you $2 an hour extra. And it's all about having just management in the company.
Yes.
And if you don't have that, if you have that, a union's going to hinder your ability to work with your employees. But if you don't have that, it's a place where you really need it. I have a friend of mine I was talking to who's a teacher, and he said, I can look back and see how many times we would have gotten screwed by the district, but our union stepped in and took care of it, because when you're a school district, you have complete power, and you have
it's not a balanced situation. So guys, I'll just say, the reason I wanted to ask about the stock options is that in my business that I live in the biotech business, every company gives 20% of their capital to the employees. You are a weird company if you haven't set aside 20% of your stock for employee-based stock options. Now, they typically vest over 4 years, so we don't just give it to people and they can walk out the door the next day. But the purpose is exactly what you said, Michael, to align the investors, management, and the employees for what are we doing here, and then to share the fruit, if there is fruit, to share it with the people that help create it.